Hey, Northgate. Welcome to day 64 of your New Testament summer reading plan. Colossians 3, Luke 20, and Revelation chapter 2 today. I'm going to start just sharing what I sense the Lord speaking to me from Colossians 3. I had a hard time getting past the first few verses. If then you have been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your mind on things that are above, not on things that are on earth. For you have died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is your life, appears, then you also will appear with him in glory. Yeah, there's something shifting my thinking as I read this today. I don't know how to put it into words in some ways. Sometimes I could just sort of feel a shift in my thinking. It just, wow, that's not how I always think. I can't get over verse 3. It says, "For you have died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God." And then beginning of verse 4, "When Christ, who is your life." The rest of the chapter was rich. Just, it felt like it was food for my soul today, but it seems to just flow out of that starting perspective, at least for me. I have died. Like my Christ, who is my life, when he appears, my life is hidden with him. Um, that is just changing my thinking today. I don't know how else to say it. There's something that's really um, I'm wondering at. There's something ruminating in my mind in there, and that's really encouraging. I found that it helped as I thought about Revelation chapter 2, specifically the letter to the church in Smyrna. In verse 10, it says, "Be faithful unto death, and I will give you the crown of life." Yeah, in this letter to this church, Jesus is warning this church that tribulation's coming. Some of them are going to be thrown into prison. And yeah, I can't get over this. Really changed, this really baked my mind today too, that imagine this letter being to us. Imagine getting a word from the Lord. Northgate, there's some tribulation coming. I'm not saying this is it, but you know, be faithful unto death. So like you guys are going to go through some things. It just changes my thinking to imagine Jesus saying that to me. What if that was actually coming my way? What if I was to die for what I believed? But again, that just it for me the dots felt connected back to Colossians 3. Like I've already died. My life is hidden with Christ and God. So if I'm going to be faithful unto death in this life, I'm just putting off, a temporary body and just entering into the fullness of who he's made me to be. I'm just putting off this tent, Paul says elsewhere, and stepping into my heavenly home, the spiritual being that I am forever with him. I hope that makes sense, but yeah, that really is something I'm going to think on today. I don't know that I'm always living in that perspective. I'll just share a couple more things that stood out. I mean, and there's a few other letters to different churches in Revelation chapter 2. The church in Ephesus seems to be doing a good job of defending truth. Jesus commends them. He says, "You hate the work of the Nicolaitans," which I also hate, some sort of heresy, heretical group. Um, yeah, he says to this same church, "You have tested those who call themselves apostles and are not, and found them to be false." So they've done a good job at defending truth, but they lost the love that they had at first. So I think I saw one danger for a church to fall into, for any of us to fall into. We can be right, but missing love. There's a danger. But then there's two other churches who feel like they're missing it in sort of the opposite way. Maybe Jesus doesn't mention that they've lost love, but to the church in Pergamum, there's some there who were holding to the teach of Balaam, who taught Balak to put a stumbling block before the sons of Israel. And he goes on, there's a deception. And there's some who hold to the teaching of the Nicolaitans in that church. So deception is a problem there. He doesn't rebuke them or bring up an issue of whether they're loving and genuine, but they're being deceived. Same thing, but different in the church in Thyatira. There's a prophetess who's deceiving people in their church, teaching them some really twisted stuff. So maybe two dangers. You can be lax on truth and still be loving and genuine and wind up in trouble. But you can also be real stern on defending truth and wind up in trouble if you miss love. Um, the other thing that stood out from Luke 20 today, It always feels like there's too much to say in a short video, but I'll just share one thing. The Sadducees challenge Jesus. They're trying to give him a puzzle, and it never occurred to me. I've read this many times. Jesus sort of answers their question, but he says in verse 37, he addresses what the Sadducees believe. The Sadducees, it says that they deny that there is a resurrection. They don't believe the resurrection is a thing. It's not going to happen. And Jesus sort of addresses that. But I never noticed that they actually brought that up first. I always thought Jesus was just, oh, by the way, while I have you, and then he just like destroys their whole belief system. But it somehow it never occurred to me. They bring it up first. They say they give him a puzzle in verse 32. I'll skip over reading the whole thing, but they say, after the woman also died, so in the resurrection, therefore, whose wife will the woman be? But so they're giving him a puzzle, but they don't believe there is a resurrection. So they're saying, hey, Jesus, in the resurrection, whose wife will the woman be? But it's a trick question because they're actually trying to say, look, we don't believe in a resurrection at all. And here's an example of why we think it's silly. So I know it just never occurred to me that Jesus wasn't just bringing it up while he had them and dismantling them. They challenged him on this idea that the resurrection wasn't real, and he um, destroys that thought in just a couple of verses. So anyway, I love when Jesus sort of owns the people challenging him. He just destroys these trains of thought so simply. The wisdom of God is amazing, and um, I think I need to be reminded of that in my own life. I need to just rely less on human thinking and be wary of that. And man, just listen to him. So I don't know what stood out to you guys today. That's some thoughts from me. This has been a great journey. Love learning with you. Love that we're going through this together. Be blessed. Have a good day.